there, and whenever I take the train, I always feel threatened. Like whenever they enter the train, like this security people, they go straight to the colored people to check if they have the tickets. And if you don't have the ticket, they fine you like 4,000 forints or 8,000 forints. 8,000 if you can pay on the spot, but if you cannot pay on the spot, they take like 16,000 forints. I cannot remember the conversion to euro, but it's always like that. It's interesting that when I am seated with my friends from my university, like I'm with some white friends, but they're not really Hungarians. Some of them are Russians, some of them are Americans. These security people, they don't go check my friends. They go straight to me, and they check me with if I have my ticket. So I totally understand this concept of power relations, marginality, in a very typical, train. Or and it's also interesting. Like for example, you see the difference in Budapest compared to, for example, in Paris. You see different kind of how to say, like different kinds of culture in the metro station. Like for example, you can see how the tactics of the poor, like when you hit use a ticket, somebody will suddenly pass through you, follow you at the back, like so that they won't have to pay for the ticket. I've experienced it a lot when I was in Paris, which was really surprising for me because when I was in Budapest, I cannot do that because they always check the colored people. So. But that's just one component of this kind of research. Like it's really interesting to see how, maybe this is also one of my questions, like how do you observe this kind of marginality if you put it in a bigger context of control and the context of power relations in terms of putting up a station in a particular area. Then you also covered this concern about how the symbolic power, and how culture can be perceived in terms of the relationship of the station in the time. Like for example, in the Philippines, we have a very vague concept of time. Like Filipinos are always branded as people who are always late because they don't have a precise measurement of time. Like we don't say that the train will arrive in 4 o'clock, in 4:10, 4:15, whatever, because there's just no concept of that kind of Western exact time. It's really but in contrast, when you go to Japan, when they say like it's 4:13, the train will be there 4:13. So it's really reflective of how culture is being practiced too in terms of in relation to time. So I kind of like that concept, but my question in relation to that is how do you connect this concept of time in terms of value as it really represents in terms of this kind of research that you do? I don't know if it makes sense, because you told us that your methodology involved participant observation. You also did archival research, but how does this time value relationship applies to this kind of methodology that you apply? And then lastly, I'm sorry, it's just really interesting. This concept about economy that you've mentioned earlier, originating from the domestic to a more national or maybe global, it just reminded me of how the U.S. railway industry developed, the modern economy of the U.S. now. Like you have Vanderbilt, who was one of the very first tycoons of railway, who dictated how the economy of the U.S. will develop in the 1800s, and then you have Carnegie into steel, the relationship of steel, and then you have oil by Rockefeller. So you have all these tycoons playing in these different fields, but they all merge in this railway industry. So my concern is, will it be possible to see it also in this kind of research? Like if you do this kind of sociological research, how do you look into this kind of mechanism like this global, big tycoons, different players, but all meeting in the same point, which in this case is the railway. So, yeah, thank you.
Yeah. would you prefer? You could collect several questions, or you could maybe 3 questions, and you could start the other, and then maybe we'll find more. Jenny.
Yeah, thanks very much for your job. As someone, yeah, as a long-term resident across the English Channel, we also didn't have the exact timing. I mean, we always got the 1900, you know, train always didn't disappear and enter. But yeah, I would like to ask about the would you please contextualize that kind of the train stations became a war zone. That's the 2016 March experience, because I was wondering, because that timing was really interested me is a few days after the attack in Brussels, and I remember that immediately after the bomb in Brussels. The other days I was in Belgium, so the almost all the stations suddenly. First, even back in London, from St Pancras, you find something very strange. It's become more heavy armed, and in Brussels, then basically even you change from platform to platform, they force you to go through one route. I wonder if that kind of war zone like experience in the French train stations is also some kind of reinforced by the Russian by the attacks of Brussels, or that already happened before that. And the other things that I wonder is about the comparison of the train networks in the metropolis and the colonies, and I wonder whether the train networks in the colonies built similarly to the way that's built in the metropolis, or they mainly focus on not where the people live, but where the resources are. I was asking this question because I'm thinking about the train network in Taiwan. Basically, there are several important settlements with their train stations, but the trains basically built around the island to transport the resources rather than the people. So I wonder how the train networks in the colonies of France work.
Yeah. Korean. Yes, go ahead.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your brilliant insights into what I would think of as a scholarship on the move, and as we study the governmentality of travel. And while during the talk, I couldn't help thinking about other means of transportation, such as airplanes, ships, even some other means, like ground transportation, such as buses, subways. And but in your talk, you very clearly explained how the historical significance, the political weight of the railway, because it's not just the it's like the symbol of Western modernity. It's the state apparatus of control and management of the empire, right? But I was thinking about how these other means of transportation would fit into this picture of yours, where you study the controlled policing of bodies. And I could think about like how the policing of legitimacy in airplane traveling is spectacular, right? It's not just the management of borders, the management of your body movements, the angle of your seat, of who goes on first onto the airplanes and who gets to cross the borders, who gets admitted. It's not just the policing of appearance or class, but also of nationality and of ethnicity, I guess. So I would wonder how you would, if you think that that's an interesting way to like branch out for your project, and yeah, I would love to hear how you think.
So you can go on with some.
Yes. Thank you. I will start from your question. And I'm really, I'm wondering how to give a picture of these effects without producing even more biopolitics, because that's always the problem. That means if you start to study what are completely the effects of racism on the bodies, what it makes, because Sara Ahmed, she has shown like that the fact of experimenting an emotion, like for example living always in the fear that we will be the target of the police force, or that if we go there then we will have to experience the control. Of course it's limiting the movements of the body and the space we take into it. But is it good to describe this? Or could it be a way of like describing what it makes racism? I don't know. I'm still ambiguous with this. I need to think more. But in France we don't have, it's not allowed to have statistics based on ethnicity or race. So it's never possible to show anything about race. So to study the effects could be a way to do it, but I'm biased. But yeah. It was interesting that you referred to these boys that go behind you to without tickets. It's really common practice in Paris. It's happening all the time. And I think the fact that some young people, especially men, women will also experience racism, but differently, I would say. It's another topic. But it's mostly men that are targeted by the police. And it produces some young men that have nothing to lose. They will always be annoyed by the police. Most of them, they will spend some months in jail, or they will get arrested for something, because they are watched all the time. So there will be a moment where they will do something that's no good. Also, they live in poorer suburbs. I mean, this open topics, I will leave it for now. But it produces some young people that don't care about nothing, because they are always the victims. So Sara Ahmed has really a nice thing. I can't find precisely a sentence, but yes, there is nothing worse than to be a consensual threat for a subjectivity. It's impossible to build a subjectivity when we are always a threat for the others, or considered like this, or that we think that we might be. This is really terrible. The question of value. I want to. This probably I need to think it a bit more also. But I want to bring it on the side of social value. What are social value? For what we invest. That means related to what I was saying, they made unimaginable building sites just with profit. Could we put the value somewhere else? Get imagination of what we could do. This is in this sense I use the concept of value, but I don't know if it's like I don't know where I go to see it. I have to see. On the US I know nothing. I was never there. I read nothing, so I can't. And war zone, yes, it comes after the terrorist attacks. But I guess it's the same in England, but there were always terrorist attacks. It just I mean, in Paris there were several really terrible terrorist attacks in 1995. If I remember well, 2 times it was 40 people dying, which is most than since 2015. So I wonder if all these security forces that are implemented all the time for the purpose of protecting us from terrorism, I don't know if it's really for this, or it's also that in the last 15 years there were a big development of the security capitalism. And it's like a branch of capitalism that's really like active and producing a lot of money, benefits, investments and everything. And you also don't have in Taiwan, but some country, some told me in the US, for example, you don't enter a bar without how do you call this, metal detector. This is like this in Israel, for example. Israel, you can't enter somewhere without metal detector. That's a good business to implement this in the country. So I would follow more this. Even though, of course, terrorism should be considered also, but I don't know. It was always terrorism. In France, always. It was not. And train for goods. Yes, of course, in the colonies, the trains were made to transport goods, but also in the metropolis also. Now when we see the map of high-speed train, in France it's difficult to go with the train. It's really not convenient to go from one countryside to another countryside. If you want to travel in France from east to west, good luck, 12 hours minimum. France is only north-south. If you want to go to Paris from everywhere, Marseille, Paris, you cross the France in 2 hours and a half. But if you want to make like, I don't know, for example, to go to my family, it's 150 kilometers, 3 hours and a half. When Marseille, Paris, it's like 600 or 700 kilometers, and then it takes 2 hours. So yeah, the train is completely developed for goods, and on the fluxes of the capitals, also in the metropolis. It would be really interesting to work on other means of transportation. Of course, what you say about the plane, all the police controls, border controls. I experimented when I came here. I experimented a new detection of the face. I haven't. At first, I haven't seen border policemen. I was scanned like this, and after actually. But some new equipment they always get. Yes, of course it would be interesting. And when I was younger, I don't know if you have it here, but as a means of transportation in Europe, when we don't have a lot of money, we can hitchhike. And younger, I hitchhiked a lot. I had a lot of friends in Germany. It was before I did some sociology studies. And at this time, I really wanted to understand the travel of goods, because it was so funny. I was in a truck going from Poland to Spain only with nail polish. Whole truck. I was like, it's amazing the goods traveling so far. And this I had an interest for this in the past. But now I really like to study something that's so local as my snow train. And I think I will stay a bit longer on my local train. And yes, I want to talk a bit longer with people and see this precise experience. So I see all the connections you mentioned. It's really good connections, but for now I will not follow them.
Maybe we're open for a second round, right? To make sure with if anyone has any question I would like to pose, maybe one or two. Yeah, please.
I want to ask a question, maybe not really connected to the speech you did today, because I heard from Professor Liu that you are going to play some clips for us about the movie you mentioned, the Shanghai Express, and some like smoking scenes inside and its relationship between modernity and public fear, something like this. And I'm really interested in like how you want to do something like a local research about these like trend or something. Yeah, because I am really interested, so I want to hear something that if you have enough time you about to talk about today. But yeah.
You mean about the movie?
Yeah.
Shanghai?
How you want,
Yes.
how you interpret or analyze a little bit more?
I haven't gone so far to really analyze, more a reading of the pictures, because just the 5 minutes of the movie you find it easily on YouTube. The first 5 minutes they show the imperialist value. You have the time, you have the doctor, you have the colonist, you have the one trafficking opium, all white, all coming from Europe or the US. The two women, they are from the start of the movie, they are pictured like prostitutes. One guy doesn't want to travel with them, and we actually, along the movie, we don't know if they are prostitutes. But this stigma is put on them because they are independent women. And of course, because they are independent women, they also turn into being bad women. That means one is killing, I don't want to spoil you, but one is killing another guy, and the other one had cheated on the guy. So they are, of course, bad women. And all this, with time also, with the play, with let's open and be in the public space, let's close and create a private space. This is playing a lot in the pictures. And this is only few characters. And around you have 100 people. And these people are pictured as Chinese, but they are never given an individuality. They are no one. They don't speak, and when they speak, I really think I don't speak Mandarin, so I'm not sure. But I think it's only sounds. It's like blah blah. It's not language, and of course it's not translated. But this, I don't know. In France, it is common. That means in a movie, when someone will speak a language that's from outside Europe, just more short sentences, it will never be translated. So it stays as sounds, it never becomes a language. And so all this, the 5 first minutes, all together, I thought it was a picture of imperialism.
Do you have any comment or question? Yeah, please.
No, I just wanted to say thank you for an amazing presentation, and it actually made me, because I wondered if you could say a little bit more, maybe on when you started. You said you've turned to the local in order to maybe devise a different kind of relation to questions that are say seen as universal, and I just wondered if you could say maybe a little bit more. But as I was hearing or listening, I thought you have your kind of your research and its historical reach, and how you show the colonial management of railways to be state and private sort of coordinated, and how it continues into the present but has turned into a form of new local management. How that actually is giving us maybe, or to my mind, new ways of asking questions about, like, because recently in Taiwan there has been a strike, airline strike, airline workers strike, and so, and a lot of the discourse is about private government and so on, but maybe questions need to be asked in a different way, and maybe the histories of these companies need to be gone into. So that was very, very helpful. Yeah.
Maybe I can add similar questions or comments as a comment, so that you don't too exhausted. I have, of course, several comments, but I think the first one is what Vicky just said. Is colonial, the map or the genealogy for the railway construction or bridges construction during this colonial period, either in Indochina or in Algeria, show that the expansion of the colonial control has to be done through building up all these bridges and railway to connect, to exchange, but also to take or to dominate. Right? But this, as Vicky said, it seems to be inverted or reverted back home. On one hand, all these former colonized people came back here, or came here, not back, as non-citizen or second or third fourth-class citizens, and they are the most suspected or most suppressed people. So, but also national citizens also are under the same or similar colonial governmentality control. So this is something that's very remarkable. But two questions I would like to point out, or to see whether you have your views. That is there's a former European expansion of this colonial construction. So does that, because we were talking about this Belt Road Initiative and all these seaports and these railways and these whatever bridges they are building, does that resonate to what you have been studying for this former colonial project? That's just one curiosity. The second, maybe not to actual answer, but in Taiwan there's a high-speed rail train and local train that actually they separate spaces. They connect different people. For example, if we travel through this very local train, at each railway station we see all these migrant workers. Even in Zhanghua, not only Taichung, big cities or Taoyuan, but just small, very traditional towns and cities. They are groups and crowds of migrant workers from all different places, Thailand, Philippines, and so on. So I used to think Zhanghua is a very traditional, civilized city with all this literati in the Japanese colonial period, right? But now it's filled up with all these migrant workers with different towns. But for those people who travel with rapid rail, they would never meet this space. This is separated, like different spectrum. That would be interesting. But that, to bring this back to also Vicky's question, I was also wondering, because you mentioned you like to connect, you like to interview, you like to observe and like to make contact. But is it part of your, we don't see much yet, besides those people who maybe some examples of people in this seems to be a slum, or what kind of emotion you would like to connect or like to really get in touch with. But I believe in your travel with in Taiwan, you specifically wanted to look through the map and go through the train. Are those encounters you would like to have? I mean, I'm maybe expanding my question too much, but just for you to close out.
What was it? Yes, the local. Related to the local. There is something I will want to observe in the next years. It will come, and I think it will be interesting, and it will link my two researches. Because the one with sexuality from before. Because here I saw for the local trains you need to pass your card, so you can't go on the platform. But in France I think it's like really common since always, and it's also a purpose in movies. You bring someone to the train. It's a pleasure to do it, and you also pick up someone at the train, and you do it on the platform. And couples, they are meeting at the platform and they kiss and they're really happy. And this is happening a lot. This is really a tradition, I would say, cultural habit to do it. And you would not meet in front of the station. You go on the platform. Now they are implementing some doors. You can't reach the platform anymore like you have here. And this, I'm curious, because they can't make it like direct. Because people, they will oppose to this. It's really, you bring your daughter to the train, to go to school. I mean, it's really common. So I'm curious about how it will work. It's more the local in that sense. Maybe because also with the last question, which emotion I want to know. And I'm also interested, of course, with the collective resistance, because I couldn't tell you about all my adventures. But there were a night, inspector, she became crazy, let's say. And it was in midwinter, it was cold, a teenager arrived, she wants to enter the train, she says, I don't have a ticket, and the inspector says, okay, go away. And I jump with another woman at the same time, we say, okay, we pay her ticket. And then the inspector, she says, no. And then we're like, please don't be stupid, we just pay the ticket, it's no problem, it's really cold outside. It was 10:30 in the evening in winter. The next train was at 12:30, 2 hours in winter, waiting in the deep winter. So we were like, okay, don't be stupid, we pay the ticket, the story is over. The woman, she really, I don't know, she got mad, she went on the platform, then announcement, the train is cancelled for everyone. And it was a beautiful moment because we were like 200 people in this train and we gathered together. I mean, it was really impressive. And we stayed there. We had 2 hours to wait. So during 2 hours, we made inside, outside, different things. We tried our best. We were like, please, just the train, leave the train go. And I'm also interested in this kind of experience and emotions. And to conclude this story, finally we got into the next train. We had to go through one door, but we get used to it. And this was with many cops. And different kind, all the different kind we saw before, the riot cops and so on. They also had sent to us the riot cops that threatened to send us some tear gas. I mean, it became really crazy for nothing, this story. And during the event, there were a Chinese professor studying it there, and he was like, but why this train is like this every day? I was like, yeah, good question. We talked together also with our women, we were a bit together. And Amy took some pictures, and when we arrived in Saint-Etienne, there were no more public transportation, so I drove the people around, blah, blah, blah. We kept the numbers, we stayed in touch. And during the event, I had called the newspaper, because I was, okay, local newspaper, why not? No, maybe they will be interested by this story, but they haven't answered. But the day after, they called me again, and then I reported what I saw, and they wanted to make a photo of me. I was like, I'm not interested from the newspaper, but the professor made nice pictures, take this. So the journalist also took the version of the women, of the professor, etc. And he called me back in the evening, and he said the train company made a public declaration. They cancelled the train yesterday because 10 young men drunk wanted to take the train without tickets, and some travelers wanted to support them in doing it. So the journalist reported in the newspaper the both versions of the story. But it's this kind of emotions, I think this is what I want to experience and work. Yes. On the, just the last word on something you said,
Just some comments, you don't need to really address.
no, but I saw here that I haven't taken the high-speed train in Taiwan. I took the, I don't know the name, but there is a complete local and another that's not so local. I took these two ones, and they also do it in France. There is also some separate trains. But now with the project they have, it seems that the stations, they will only become for rich people. And this makes me wonder. Because there is no other stations. They just transform all the stations with our standards. And this is also true in the commercial centers. Yes.
Alright, that will be all for today. It's a long day. So let's thank Céline Dunn again for her wonderful